So how do you turn a video game that is meant to be replayed at least 4 times to get the full story into a single story novel? That was the challenge posed by the Silent Hill F novelization that came out in Japan recently, and I finally finished reading it over the holidays. Is it worth your time? Does it present any new information not in the games? How on earth does it take a story that's meant to be replayed over and over, with multiple endings that each reveal important, and dare I say, necessary information, and put all of that into a single story? Let's check it out. First things first, this novelization wasn't written by Ryu Kishi, but rather adapted by Kuro Shiro, who appears to have made a career out of doing novelizations like this, alongside various horror short story works. Other novelizations he's done include Yomawari, NG, Sadako vs Kayako, etc, etc. He was given the honestly pretty complex task of taking a game told through various loops and random files hidden throughout those loops, and turning them into a single, cohesive story that can be understood in a single run. How do you take a story that deliberately hides information and drip feeds it to you over several runs, and not immediately spoil what's going on by being forced to reveal it right away? That's the challenge Kuro is tasked with. Does he succeed? Well, it's important to note that I read the novel after finishing the game and having done numerous deep dives into various topics within the game myself. I know the story, and I know it well. So I'm not coming into the novel as a blank slate. Just the opposite. I can't tell you what this story is like to experience it for the first time this way, but like numerous reviews I've seen for this book, I wouldn't recommend that anyway. This is a book you should read after finishing the game, and it's probably best to think of it as a companion, as something that can help iron out parts of the story you may have missed or not fully understood, rather than a completely independent work all of its own. Which it can work as, yes, but that's not the best way to interact with it. For example, the book opens with that scene in the playground where Kotoyuki is attacked by the fox, and Hinako steps up to help him. This scene is fleshed out, starting with Kotoyuki and some boys chasing said fox, and it uses this opportunity to set the mood a little. Some girls who are playing nearby are rudely told off by the boys and told to shut up when they try to stop them from hurting the fox. And Kotoyuki, in his clean, pristine clothes, showing him as clearly being different to the other boys who are roughhousing, is egged into poking the poor, terrified fox. Of course, he is attacked, the roughhousing boys run off like cowards, and it's young Hinako who steps up to help him, demonstrating kindness to both Kotoyuki and the fox, and setting the scene for the story to follow. Of course, in the game, we only get snippets of this scene, and it happens closer to the end of the game than the start. As such, the novel immediately sets up that this is a tale between two people, Kotoyuki and Hinako. They know each other, they have met before, and this particular meeting as children was perhaps fate, but either way, it's literally the start of their story. The novel then cuts to Hinako arguing with her parents, leaving out the opening scenes of young Hinako with her doll and talking to Junko from the game, and instead sets the scene a little more with Hinako expressing her distaste at her brutish father and her cowardly mother for never standing up for herself. She storms out, grumbling the whole time about her mother and how she doesn't want to be like her, and decides to head to Chizuruya to see if she can talk to someone. But of course, the town is empty, and on the way, she's stopped in her tracks by a light blue 3-wheeled truck. The novel specifically tells us this truck has Okamoto Fisheries written on the side, but interestingly makes no mention of the squished bird that Hinako finds under it in-game. Instead, Hinako just ponders to herself that it must have stopped to deliver some fish to a nearby resident and goes around it. And this, perhaps, is the key difference when it comes to experiencing this story through the novel compared to the game. The novel can literally spell things out for us, and it can straight up tell us the things we're supposed to notice. How many people simply glanced over the writing on the truck the first time around? If you can't read Japanese, then no doubt you didn't even pay attention to it. But even numerous Japanese players didn't take the time in-game to run all the way around to the other side, notice that this truck has Okamoto Fisheries written on it, and then remember that when Hinako gets that strange phone call at home from the very same Okamoto Fisheries later in the game. By figuring this out yourself in the game, you get that nice, "Oh my god, so that's what that meant" rush, but the book just straight up lays it out there for you. You are supposed to notice this. That's why we're taking the time to write it, and have Hinako notice and comment on it. It makes it less impactful, but it does ensure that you don't miss it. Whether you think that's a good thing or not is up to you, however. At any rate, I won't detail the plot chapter by chapter because it's pretty much the game. If you've played the game even once, then you know the general timeline of how it goes. Hinako goes to Chizuruya, the fog monster attacks, Sakuko dies, everyone runs, Hinako ends up travelling through both Ebisugaoka and the Dark Shrine, and along the way we learn of Foxmask, the competing divine factions, and oh yeah, that little thing about Hinako getting married. But the way the novel tells this story is rather interesting. In-game, you come across files across various playthroughs that reveal more details of the story. Again, the novel straight up includes them in the plot, either as background information to further explain character motivations or events, or as something Hinako does find and pick up, like the fox origamis in the school. But the novel can't exactly loop and let you find them across several playthroughs, so all the information is included at once. And if you're wondering if the novel includes any new information, well, not really. At most, the boss fights include slightly more dialogue and interactions between Hinako and whoever she is dealing with. The Sakuko fight in particular includes a lot more back and forth between Hinako and Sakuko over the latter's betrayed feelings. But ultimately, each of these fights is less of a fight and more of Hinako and her opponent finally airing all their grievances in the open, before the final and often only blow is delivered to end the spat. Oh, and this is a good time to point out that if you're expecting Hinako to smash her way across Ebisugaoka with her pipe in this story, you'll be sorely disappointed. Interestingly, the novel chooses to avoid that almost entirely. There's no real fighting in this book. As a result, numerous enemies simply don't appear at all, and the sections of the game where Hinako might fight her way through something, or even stop to solve some puzzle, she instead just moves straight through it. There's no fighting, no puzzles. She just moves from point A to point B. And if the puzzle had some story relevance, this is instead worked in as exposition or Hinako merely thinking about it instead. For example, the rather long scarecrow puzzle sequence has Hinako simply thinking about how she got lost as a child, and how the scarecrows scared her. And that's about it. She otherwise immediately crosses the fields to end up at Rinko's house with no effort. By the same token, the Shimizu residence is massively cut down from the different layers and different dates where important events happened, to Hinako taking a quick walk around, seeing a few of the important flashbacks, encountering her other self, and then next thing she's pretty much fighting her parents, with some other flashback information oddly being worked into the fight itself. I suppose in keeping with the novel using these fights to have the characters all air their grievances at each other for a while. The only time Hinako really swings her pipe around is that final sequence where she goes Super Saiyan and all, "You're trapped in here with me," after Shiromuku kills her parents and she smashes everything in sight on her way back into town. But even that is mostly glossed over. Unfortunate, as that's one of my favourite parts of the game. So, how does the novel handle the endings? The game has 4 of them, if we don't include the UFO ending, and each of these is vital to understanding the story. We have the Red Capsules ending that really sets the scene and gives us the big reveal that Hinako is actually in her 20s and that all of this isn't actually taking place in reality as we know it. Until the final scenes anyway, and all of this is taking place at her wedding. We have the Tsukumogami and Shichibi endings that see Hinako going with either Fox Mask or Shu, again revealing further motivations for each of those characters. And then finally, the arguable true ending that gives us the final pieces we need to put the story together and gives Hinako her personal best ending. These endings obviously don't and can't work together, but the information provided in each of them is still necessary to understanding the story as a whole. You might think the novel would simply go with the Ebisugaoka in Silence ending, but it doesn't. Obviously, there will be spoilers here for the novel ending, so skip ahead if you don't want to know how it handles it. But rather than straight up adapting that ending, it features Shu and Kotoyuki laying into each other for a bit, each revealing the horrible spell they've cast on Hinako. Yes, if you didn't play through the game enough or didn't pay close enough attention, the novel literally tells us about Shu and the Red Capsules, and Kotoyuki and the love spell he cast through the letters he sent Hinako. Neither man is innocent, although ultimately, neither act was done maliciously either. Shu really did just want to help, and the novel explains that Kotoyuki wasn't even aware that he was casting a love spell. He was just following what his ancestors have always done, without understanding what that really meant. But there's also a weird moment where, for some reason, the author chose to have Fox Mask basically read out the file on the Bataren missionary that brought the White Claudia to Japan, and then give us some fat exposition on how the Kakura Makakura works that's awkwardly shoved into this ending. I think this information could have been delivered in a better way that wasn't Fox Mask, of all people, standing there and explaining to Hinako to make sure that we, the audience, also understand. But hey, it is what it is. Then, Fox Hinako battles the Shu version of the Tsukumogami, while regular Hinako battles Shichibi, Fox Mask's true form. After both are defeated, Hinako finally reveals what it is that she wants. A stillness where she can sort out her worries in peace. And we cut to both Hinako's on the shrine gate, and the novel ends with that letter from Kotoyuki as he's out living his own life. The end. So the novel tries to combine the main 3 endings while not really touching on the Red Capsule's bad ending at all. other than how Shu used them in an attempt to bring Hinako to her senses. Now, I have a few issues with the novelization. First, there are several quite important parts of the story that are entirely left out. For one, unless I missed it somewhere, the novel never mentions Hinako's actual age. That's a rather important part of the story. Also, the water dragon lore. You know, pretty much the entire reason all this exists. Just isn't there either. You get hints that the Tsukumogami is upset at being usurped by the foxes, but much of the lore and reasons behind the divine war that's going on, at the heart of the story, just isn't here. I don't even think that would have been too hard to include, nor would it have taken up much more space, so its omission is baffling to me. And yes, that means all the Heaven's Benediction stuff and the sacred sword isn't here either. The sword's existence is briefly mentioned, but that's it. I suppose they tried to distill the story down to simply Hinako and her fears of marriage, but it leaves so much on the cutting room floor that it feels a little bland without it. And as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't actually played the game, the story is probably going to seem disjointed and even rushed at points. You don't have the added benefit of taking your time, exploring, and taking in both the story and the world like you do in a video game. The novel just keeps moving you from point A to point B to point C, while telling you the important parts you should keep in mind. And that's it. I saw one review describe the novel as a scenario arrangement, rather than a novel, which is pretty accurate. It works great as a companion piece to the game, and may help better explain some aspects that were otherwise confusing, but purely as a novel, well, it's working with a really tough story to tell in one go, but it does do its best. I did enjoy it a lot, and if you love the game, you will find neat things in here to enjoy. Like there's a moment early on where Hinako comes across Sakuko's dead body covered in flowers, and she starts ripping at the flowers covering her eyes, because she knows that Sakuko is afraid of the dark. And so, in her panic, she desperately wants to do anything she can to help her, even though she knows she's dead. It's such a neat little touch, and not something you can really experience in the game. There's another point where Hinako sees Shiromuku's lack of face and realizes that she's actually the other version of herself that she met back in the Shimizu residence. That encounter, like the game, ended with the other Hinako's face falling off, and she uses that to put two and two together, something the game never outright states. Moments like this are where novels shine, because you can hear the characters' inner thoughts, and so there are moments where you can get a little more up close and personal with Hinako throughout. Now, as of making this video, I haven't seen any announcements about this book being translated into English, but if you can read Japanese, I do highly recommend picking it up. Even if your Japanese level isn't that high yet, this does follow the story of the game very closely, so you can use that knowledge to help you as you go along. The book seems to frequently sell out, however, so you may have to wait for yet another reprinting. It's a perfectly fine addition to your Silent Hill F collection though, and I'm glad I read it. But what did you guys think of this one? Have you read the novel yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.